Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Live here, and today we're reviewing for you The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim Anniversary Edition on the Nintendo Switch 2. This mini-review was written by the wonderful PJ O'Reilly and has been adapted for video by me. But anyway, that's more than enough waffling. Let's dive right into things. Skyrim. We need to talk. Back when we reviewed the 2022 Anniversary Edition update on Switch, we gave it a 7 out of 10 and summarized that whilst it was amusing that Todd Howard was still signing off on versions of the game, there were enhancements enough through some new quests and the addition of the Creation Club mods, and indeed fishing, that fans would get their money's worth, whilst newcomers were treated to a solid, stutter-free version of the epic RPG. Nice. With a game this long in the tooth, albeit one that everyone seems to be unable to stop buying and playing, ourselves included, although we like to think we're doing it ironically, we thought, yep, a good 7 out of 10 hearty slap on the back for the effort and we'd be able to move on with our lives. But oh no. Oh no! You might have already clocked where we're going with this thanks to my tone of voice, but let's break it down a bit, okay? What has happened here is that Bethesda has taken a game that, on Switch, whilst relatively constrained in comparison to some of the other fancier ports, it got the job done smoothly and competently. Yes, it was running at 30 frames a second, but it was also sipping power, like using almost nothing. With this Switch 2 upgrade, they've decided to smash a bunch of volumetric lighting effects and graphical enhancements into the situation, as well as upping the resolution. Now, we're no Digital Foundry at the end of the day, but we're fairly certain that Nintendo's DLSS is being employed here, and the resolution has indeed improved. But then, why not at the very least 40 frames a second? Honestly, lovely people, Bethesda's crapped out a terrible version of a game that they've released hundreds of times already, and we can't help but think that they've done this just to get it out before Christmas. There's no other reason we can think of why they would release their precious baby Skyrim, always re-releasing game in this state, other than just a rush to get it onto the holiday shelves. The moment you boot into this Switch 2 port, once you've ridden the wave of excitement that is admittedly noticeably faster loading times and a slightly better draw distance, you're immediately presented with a game that is just not as good at all to play. And the icing on the cake, if you just want to delete it and go back to the old version, well, you're going to need to delete this one entirely and re-download the older one, because they haven't even done that right. It still runs at 30 frames a second, but now the input latency is seemingly even worse than before. We're talking playing an online fighting game on a Switch Lite on bad Wi-Fi kind of bad. Oh, and to top it all off, it's a massive 53 gigabytes download as well. That's nearly 40 gigabytes more to make something slightly prettier, but ultimately overall a worse experience. We've no doubt that these issues will be fixed eventually. They may even make it 60 frames a second down the road, and it will be a lovely version of the game then, especially given that the mouse controls are there and, well, in theory they work. But the game we're talking about here is Skyrim, a game from the 11th of November 2011, not Cyberpunk 2077, which can do 40 frames a second. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim Anniversary Edition on Switch 2, you're getting a 4 out of 10 from us. Right, so what about my own personal thoughts? Surely I can't think of it quite so poorly, can I? No, I agree with everything that PJ said. This is a really, really bad port. Like, yes, it looks a little bit better, absolutely. In fact, I would say it looks markedly better, much sharper, crisper, the lighting's better, but it is not worth it for the sacrifices you have to make, and they're sacrifices that frankly you shouldn't have to make. First of all, let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, the input latency is unforgivably bad. Like, there has always been some input latency on Skyrim. I've always remembered that. It's always felt a little bit mushy to control, but it is not like this. Like, it is properly properly bad. I don't have any sort of like objective way to measure the input latency or anything like that, but I have done some calculations, which I'll share with you in a moment. But first, I want to talk about the mouse controls, because this is where the input latency really, what's the opposite of shines, or what's the bad version of shines, really smells. It really smells. It's bad enough that the game is running at 30 frames a second, so 30 hertz. Immediately, that's going to reduce responsiveness. But even then, this is absolutely, this is unplayable. I mean, if somebody broke into your house and put a gun to your head and say, play Skyrim using mouse controls on Switch 2 and get to Windhelm, or even complete the game, you could do it. It is possible. We have seen far more complicated things done in gaming, but you would never choose to do it. I am not prone to motion sickness in gaming. I can even do VR and feel generally fine, and that's even, you know, like moving around, walking and stuff like that. It's not perfect. I'm not saying I've got like massive VR legs or anything like that, but I'm fine. I was not fine doing this. The mouse controls are utterly vomit-inducing. It's kind of the same with the motion aiming, but to be honest, that's always been a little bit pointless. The fact that you can't change how sensitive it is, or at least I've never been able to find the right setting. Maybe it's tied in with look sensitivity, but then I want that to be separate to the stick. I think it's best if I just show you the mouse controls for the latency. This is what it looks like on the Switch home menu. This is what the mouse actually responds to. And to be honest, it's not amazing on the Switch, but it's okay. By my very rough and woolly estimates, it's about 50 milliseconds of input latency, which isn't amazing. It really isn't, but it's okay. Like, it's not great, but it's okay. And if you're the type of person who thinks that's not usable, you ain't seen nothing yet, fella. This is how mouse controls are on Skyrim on Switch 2. It is unbearable, frankly. I have been able to roughly, and I mean really roughly, estimate that this is 200 milliseconds of input latency. That, again, that is just me filming the screen and counting the frames. It is not, like, super accurate by any means, but using the same two systems, it means that it is quadrupling the input latency of the Switch 2, which is baffling. I think just seeing it like that shows just how bad it is, but there are some other points I want to cover, and yeah, it's 30 frames a second, which is, for a game of this vintage, completely unacceptable, frankly. You know, I sort of brushed it aside a bit when I first thought about it as like, oh, it's 30, that's really annoying, but at least, you know, let's move on with our lives. No, I really don't think it's far more than annoying. It makes the whole game look incredibly smeary. In stills, the game looks alright, but in motion, like when you're moving the camera and stuff like that, it all just falls apart. It's just not good. There's also like some strange pop-in I noticed, like, you know, characters and things just pop, just appearing, and maybe that's the case in other versions of the game. I don't have every version to test it with, but this is the Switch 2. This is capable of so much more. If it, you know, okay, if it was running at 30 frames a second, at the very least, do not have the input latency we have, and do not have random pop-in. I mean, come on! What's worse still is it's not even a particularly solid 30 frames a second. I've seen some really bad drops in performance, like more than I ever remember seeing in Skyrim before. It seems to be when it's loading things in, when you're wandering around like the big open spaces, you know, the world itself, as opposed to stuff like within a building, but it's just not acceptable. I mean, look at this. Some people are probably no doubt saying, well, it's a free upgrade, you know, you can't expect the world, and that is a reasonable point. But the thing is that this is still a standalone video game. It's not like it's a free game for everyone to download. It's only free if you've already previously owned it, and only the anniversary edition. Otherwise, it's like $20 or something like that. And it's just not good enough for that. It's just not good enough. I believe that the Switch 1 version had pretty bad input latency as well, from what I remember, but the Switch 2 should absolutely have substantially better performance. Like, it's not, essentially what we've got here is it's just a visual upgrade, and that is pretty much it. Okay, yes, you can play with mouse controls, but Christ, you don't want to. It is an utter disappointment. I really don't know if I can put it any other way. I mean, I could, but, you know, I want to keep this reasonably clean. It is just an utter utter disappointment. The game honestly deserves better.
While you